I'm so excited for you all to jump into this final workshop. We've got a lot to cover this evening. We've got an amazing guest speaker for you this evening. I think you're going to really enjoy this. Now, this workshop is all about how to make the most out of that first internship. How do you make the most of that first internship or first job? Maybe you're jumping into a full-time job, you're a senior, you're graduating. Maybe you're hopefully jumping into an internship. Even if you're not jumping into an internship, maybe you're working on a part-time job that you want to make the most out of for the summer. That's okay too. This workshop is all about how can you make the most out of that first opportunity over the summer so that you can really set yourself apart. By the way, if you have a part-time job and you don't have an internship, there are plenty of ways that you can go about setting yourself apart in that part-time job that could lead to internships down the road. Seriously, do not settle and do not sell yourself short for the network that you could create from any particular opportunity. I know that I could tell you that back in the day when I was a server and bartender, I met plenty of people that ultimately opened up doors for opportunities that I ended up taking advantage of later. You never know who you will meet, even in the jobs you think are not your main thing. It's understandable, but leverage it. Don't ever write any potential connection off. So, as you all know, my name's Garrett. I'm the founder of Ambition in Motion. This workshop's going to be about 50 minutes long. Please ask any questions you have. If you have any questions in the comments section, as you all know, I'm gonna ask 3 questions during the duration of this workshop. Your job is to answer them within 24 hours of this workshop going live. I don't necessarily know exactly what the questions are going to be. I always prompt them based on our guest speaker. Sometimes I'll slip in an intro question during this segment here. It just depends how I'm feeling for the day. So I'm so excited for you all to jump in, learn from our guest this evening. I'm so excited to learn your answers to the questions that we asked you, and I'm so excited to engage with you all. Now, I really want to set the expectations. As you all know, you're not going to get an internship handed to you on a silver platter. That's just not how this program works. Now, by the way, have students landed opportunities at Google, major investment banks, major engineering firms, major marketing firms? Absolutely, happens all the time. And have they done that as a result of meeting with their mentor, taking advantage of the things that they've learned through this program? Yeah, absolutely. But if you think this is going to get handed to you on a silver platter, I think you already know by now that's just not how this program works. You have to work for the things that you get. Now, this platform can be a springboard for you to get to where you want to be. Leverage this as an opportunity to really launch your early career path. Absolutely, yes, this is something that can really do make a huge impact on you getting to where you want to be. But this is not a handout. This is not something that is just given to you. And especially in this time period that we're living in with the crazy coronavirus going on and all these other things going on where work is potentially unsure of, this program could be critical to you really setting yourself apart compared to your peers. Take advantage of it. I really think that you're going to enjoy what we have to say in this workshop this evening. Now, I really want to talk about the intentionality of feelings, because here's the thing. At the end of the day, how you make someone feel in a given moment is going to really impact how they feel about you down the line. So I want you to just take a quick moment on a piece of paper or on your phone. I want you to identify, how do you want other people to feel about you? So when you're going into that first job, that first internship, that first part-time job, how do you want your boss? How do you want your colleagues? How do you want your peers? How do you want other people to feel about you? Write it in the comment section. Write it down on a piece of paper. I want to know, how do you want other people to feel about you? Because that intentionality is so key. It is so key, because here's the thing. If you don't write this down, if you don't set out an intention for how you want other people to feel about you, they are going to perceive you in any which way that you may feel on that given day. And that could be a good thing. It could be a bad thing. If you're having an off day and you're thinking to yourself like, oh man, like, I'm having a rough day, you can let that spew on other people. It happens all the time. And people come up with excuses for it. You might say, hey, my dog died earlier today, or I just found out my grandma's got cancer, having a rough day. And don't get me wrong, there's not an excuse for having a rough day, but you've got to be able to realize that as a professional, you've got to put on multiple different hats to get yourself in the zone to make the most out of it. So no matter what's going on with your world, you can't let your personal world affect your business world. And if you do, it's going to potentially negatively impact the way that other people feel about you. But if you set an intention right now about how you want other people to feel about you, you're going to put yourself in a much better situation. If you think to yourself, I want people to think about me as dependable and reliable and someone that's always upbeat, confident, and excited when it comes to work. It doesn't matter what's going on with your outside world. Even if the worst thing could have possibly happened in your outside personal world, if you set yourself an intention right now that that's how you want other people to feel about you, when you come into work, you're going to straighten yourself up because you've already identified, I don't want people to feel sad, bad, or like that I'm a charity case because I've got other things going on in my outside world. You want other people to feel like you are a rock, that you are someone that they can go to, that you are someone that's always showing up professionally. Boom. You will get yourself into the mindset ready to be successful. Now that leads to the 3 keys that we cover in every workshop for success in this mentor program, which is strategy, story, and state. And as I just said, it doesn't matter what's going on in your outside world. It doesn't matter what the state of the world is. If you are a rock, if you are someone that physically comes into a state conducive for being successful every single time, you will be successful. I promise you that. So I want to do right now is I want to get you into a state conducive for being successful. I want you to stand up. And I want you to shake it loose. I want you to shimmy it out. I want you to let it go. I want you to scream at the top of your lungs. On the count of 30, scream 1, 2, 3. Yeah! Just let it out. Let it loose. Let it go. You're getting yourself pumping. You're getting blood flowing to your brain. You're releasing endorphins. You're getting yourself ready to be successful. The reason why that is so key is because no matter what is going on in your world, you can drive your emotions with your motions. Your motions drive your emotions, meaning that if you get out, you move, you do a power pose, you get crazy, you can get yourself in a state conducive for other people wanting to be around you. You can get yourself feeling good, even if you don't want to feel good. Even if you think to yourself, I just want to remorse for a little bit. I just want to be sad for a little bit. You can be sad on your own time, but when it comes to work time, you step your game up. And the way that you step your game up is you get your emotions and you turn them into positive emotions. I can tell you that right now. Even when you don't want to feel on your best self, your emotions can get yourself into an emotional state conducive for being successful, even if it's only for a temporary period of time. I promise you, your emotions, getting moving, getting running, getting going, getting just shaken out will get yourself successful. And that will be a huge catalyst for you being successful on the job, standing apart from other people. Because everyone else is going to wonder, like, man, how are you able to stay upbeat, positive, just like a go-to person every single time while other people are taking sick days or just having off days? And you can tell, everyone can tell. It's because you are making an intention to be that way before you come into work every single day. It's critical. Now, the next key is your story. What's the story you tell yourself? Now, that's a big point of the intentionality. What is the story you tell yourself for why you're going to be successful? If you're telling yourself a negative story, like, hey, you know what? I don't deserve to be here. I'm not qualified. I'm just honestly, I don't even know why I'm in the room. If that's a story you tell yourself, that is the outcome that will be perceived by other people. But if you tell yourself a story, man, I can do this, I can make an impact, I can learn from these people, I can engage, I can be the energetic person who does what it takes, works the hardest to get to where I need to be. If you come in with that mentality, you can be successful. Now, the last key is your strategy. What are you going to do to make sure that you set yourself apart from your peers? Now, there's a few things that we talk about with our guest speaker, but there's a few things that I would love to discuss with you right now. The first one is what is focal is causal. This is popularized by the work of Dr. Robert Cialdini. Essentially, what it means is that whatever is seen is perceived, which means that it is all optics. By that, I mean, if your supervisor, if your boss, if your CEO sees you showing up early for work, working hard on projects, taking initiative, they will attribute the success of the entire intern team to you. But if they see you on your phone, on social media, doing something lazy, just doing things that are not, like spreading gossip at the water cooler, not working when you should be working, anything that could be perceived as negative, if they see that, they will perceive that just as likely as they do the hardworking stuff. So it is really critical that whatever people see about you, whoever you want to make sure that you impress, that they see the type of person that you want to portray, and that they do not see the type of person you do not want to portray. You will think to yourself, man, I wonder how does XYZ person get promoted over another person? I can tell you how. It's that they are seen doing good work while the other people are not seen doing good work. Make sure that you're seen doing good work. In fact, what I always find the most interesting about this research of Dr. Robert Cialdini is its extrapolation to other areas of life. specifically as, you know, I don't know if any of you all are holed up right now for coronavirus and sitting inside watching television, but what they've observed, what he's observed in his research is that when cameras, especially in police interrogations, are facing any particular person, whether that be the police officer or the suspect, when the camera is facing the person, one particular person, a jury is much more likely to attribute negative feelings towards that person if the camera is facing them. So if the camera is facing a suspect in an interrogation, the jury is much more likely to attribute guilt on the party of the suspect than they are to think that the cop is asking leading questions, trying to get an answer that may not actually exist. However, flip it around. When the camera is facing the police officer, not the suspect, the likelihood that the jury is going to think that the cop, the police officer, is asking leading questions, trying to get an answer that may not actually be essentially the guilt of the person who's under interrogation, it essentially increases substantially more. The point I'm trying to make is that when what people see is what they perceive. So at the end of the day, if God forbid you're ever in a police interrogation situation and you notice that the camera is rolling, at the best you want to make sure that the camera is side by side equally to you both, or not facing you and facing the police officer. It's crazy how much of an impact that has on how people perceive other people. But more importantly, as it pertains to the workplace, make sure that people see you doing good work and not see you doing bad work. It's not a tit for tat type of thing. One bad deed is about 10 good deeds worth. You have to really, really make sure that you're not seen doing anything bad, or you are going to be on the shit list of your supervisor. And that's not a place you want to be. So the next thing that I want to talk about is this theory called the next in line theory. Essentially what this says is that when somebody is talking or about to speak, their likelihood of retaining any information before or after their speech is very low. So if you know that your supervisor is about to give a presentation, or someone that you really look up to, maybe you are about to see a keynote speaker, you're thinking to yourself, I love this keynote speaker, I love what he or she has to say, I want to go up to him or her after their speech. Bad idea. Here's why. People, when they speak, are much more likely to think about what they just said if they just finished giving a speech, or what they're about to say if they're about to give a speech. Their likelihood of retaining any new information is very minimal. So therefore, you need to give the person you're trying to make a positive impression to a leeway period before you bring up new information to them, because that will increase the likelihood that your message is actually going to resonate in their mind. But if you come up to them right before a speech or right after a speech that they just gave or are about to give, their likelihood of remembering what you said, very low. So just something to keep in mind. This also applies to a boss who's giving a speech, any colleague that's giving a speech, anybody who's about to speak publicly for anything. Make sure you don't talk to them immediately before or afterwards, because they're not going to remember what you said. So the last thing that I want to touch on is this concept called matching and mirroring. This is a great key for building rapport in the workplace, especially for someone who's got negative body language. So I think we've touched on this before in the past, but you should not have your arms crossed when you're at the workplace. It conveys that you're closed off and that you're not open to learning new information. But there's a lot of people that have bad body language in the workplace. There's going to be a lot of people that will cross their arms to you. Can you cross back? The answer is yes. And I know this might sound crazy, but people feel a subconscious connection to others that they are similar to. And this can be in your mannerisms and your speed of speech. Not your dialect of speech, but your speed of speech. So if somebody has a very thick Southern accent and you try to emulate that Southern accent, but you don't actually have a Southern accent, they're going to sniff that out immediately. It's going to be perceived as inauthentic. But if someone's talking really quickly and you're saying, I'm going to work on that, boss, I'm going to make sure I get that done, I'm going to work on it right away, they're going to think to themselves like, man, here's a sense of urgency, someone who's really with it. That's awesome. But instead, if you respond by saying, yeah, boss, I will get to it, and I will make sure that I get those assignments complete, they're going to be thinking to themselves, what the heck is wrong with this kid? Like, what does he not like get it? The sense of urgency? It's crazy how your speed of speech is actually perceived so similar together. So if you notice that someone talks really quickly or really slowly, following their speed of speech, matching and mirroring their speed of speech can actually help you build rapport with them. The other key is other body language. So like I said, crossing your arms. If someone's playing with their chin, you can play with your chin. Don't try to be overly obvious about it, but you can do it subtly. So if someone's playing with their ear, you can play with your ear. And I know it may sound crazy, but you can try this with a friend who's never heard this before. Go up to them, see if they've got any mannerisms. Maybe they're using their hands like this a lot. Emulate those hand gestures, and then all of a sudden introduce a new gesture. All of a sudden, maybe start playing with your nose. It could be any gesture, honestly. Start playing with your nose. Do it. First, emulate their hand gestures for about 5 minutes. Then introduce a new gesture. Watch what happens. They're going to start playing with their nose. They're going to start emulating the new gesture that you have now introduced. It's crazy. It's fascinating how it works, but it builds rapport between other people in the work environment. I think those are some really critical tips for you to know. The last thing that I want to leave you with is the 30 and 90-day rule. The 30-day rule is for an internship. When you first get into an internship, this is, by the way, this was, by the way, a Fortune 500 CEO taught me this tip. And that was, when you first go into an internship, meet with your supervisor and ask him or her the question, what did the best intern you ever have do to set themselves apart? On the very first day, ask that question. They're going to tell you exactly what they want you to do to set yourself apart. For the next 30 days, go ahead and do it. Don't complain. Don't ask questions. Don't share any professional goals you've got for yourself. Just go ahead, put your head down, work hard. After 30 days, you have built credibility with this person. You can then say, hey, boss, would you be open to having a conversation? I would love to share with you some of my professional goals. Boom. That's where you share some of your professional goals. That's where you say, hey, I'm interested in connecting with people in these areas or these types of fields or these types of industries. And because you've earned credibility, they will help you get there. Why? Because you've earned that credibility. But if on day one you ask for that and you've earned no credibility, they're not going to do it. Or if they do, they're going to only do it on a light version. You're not going to get the full force of how they could possibly help connect you. That is something that's really critical. 90-day rule is the exact same thing, but for a full-time job. You get a little bit longer to really build that credibility with your supervisor and your employer. So those are key tips. The last thing I want to just really mention is really starting to help you get into a routine. I know that the best way to learn anything is to actually teach it. So what I want you to do is I want you to find somebody. This could be a friend, it could be a peer, it could be a classmate, it could be anybody. Teach them something that you learned in this program. Teach them anything you learned in this program. We know that students who tell at least, we know that students who tell at least 20 people something that they learned in this program, that their likelihood of landing the job, the internship, getting into a graduate degree increases exponentially. We know that the more people a student tells, the more likely they're able to do that. What we've identified as 20 is that magic number. And this doesn't necessarily have to be you teaching them a full seminar of anything we taught. It could be literally you bringing up casually in conversation, like, hey, I learned about this thing called matching and mirroring. It's really fascinating. Boom, that's it. That's one person or multiple people if you're in a group. But what we've learned is that the more people you tell, the more likely you are actually going to retain this information, the more likely you are going to actually apply it into your professional life, and the more likely you are actually to achieve the goals you have set for yourself professionally. It's crazy how it works. It's a network effect. It really does make an impact. So I want to challenge you that after this workshop, you go out, you identify a friend, you teach them something you learned in this program, and its likelihood of sticking increases exponentially. I really want to challenge you to do that. This is our final workshop. I'm really excited for what you are able to accomplish over the summer. I would really encourage you to be in the program next semester. You're going to get a new mentor. We're going to have new speakers. We're going to talk about new content. I think you're going to really enjoy it and really springboard your career into another level. I think you're going to really enjoy that. Thank you all for being here. Have a wonderful rest of this workshop. I look forward to seeing you on the next part.
Welcome to our workshop this evening. I'm so excited to dive into our topic. Our topic is how to prepare for that first job or internship. So you might be thinking to yourself, okay, I'm about to enter into this job or I'm about to enter into this internship. And you might be thinking, what can I do to set myself apart? What can I do to make the most out of this internship? What can I do to evaluate if this job or internship is the right fit for me? Because if this is your first job or internship, you don't have that much experience. And so you also need to be vetting this organization and this industry just as much as they're vetting you. We've got a great guest with us here this evening to talk about this topic. We got Veronica Willis. Thank you for being here, Veronica. I'm so excited to have you with us to chat about how to prepare for that first job or internship. Just as like a brief overview, do you mind just giving a little overview of just who you are, what you do, and your work?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Garrett mentioned, I'm Veronica. I work for the Wells Fargo Investment Institute as an investment strategist on our asset allocation team. So what I do is help the firm determine what is the appropriate asset allocation for our firm-directed portfolios that clients can invest in, so that they're following the right advice for their particular risk tolerance and their investment goals.
So, Veronica, tell me a little bit about your first job, first internship. One, what did you study in college? How did you determine this was the field you wanted to pursue? And then when you got that first job or internship, what was that like? Was it ultimately in the path of where you're at today, or did you deviate? Like, tell me a little of your story of how you got to where you're at.
Yeah, sure. So I was a statistics major and a Spanish literature major. So I wanted to use both sides of my brain. And I also minored in economics. And when I was originally looking for positions, I was interested in actuarial sciences, but I was also interested in the investment strategy landscape. And my first job was actually at Wells Fargo, where I'm still working, in investment strategy, where I still am today. But the team I was on at the time was our international strategy team, where we developed the strategy and market targets and guidance for international fixed income, equities, commodities, and currency. And it really,
Did you use any of your Spanish speaking in the international work?
I did actually. So in the first couple of years that I was working there, there was an initiative to translate some of the reports that we publish into Spanish for a group of clients that we had that were Spanish speaking. So I did actually end up using that, at least for the first couple of years when I was on the international team. So it was a really great experience. And I think that that was part of what kind of pushed me over the edge as a candidate for that role, that I was not aware. It wasn't a part of the listing for the job or anything, but that was a goal that was in my manager at the time's mind, to eventually be able to translate some of those things. So it just kind of goes to show that that wasn't something that I was really highlighting during the interview process, but I think it was actually a skill set that just kind of pushed me above some of the other candidates.
Okay, so interesting. That is really cool. And that's, I think some students might be thinking to themselves, like, okay, do I share about some of my extracurricular activities? Will they even care? I think if there's some element of leadership, some element of foreign language speaking, some element of talent, or like some talent that you may possess that could be beneficial to the organization, definitely it seems like I would encourage you to list that in your resume, because you never know, and you never know how they might think about you and how they might want to leverage you when it comes to the job. So you started at Wells Fargo. Did you start as an intern, or did you start right out of college full time?
I started right out of college full time.
Okay.
So I didn't hold any internships during college. I studied abroad one summer, and then the other summers, I had a job working like outside of an internship arena. And that was something that I was actually concerned about starting the interview process for full-time roles, that I hadn't had a lot of internship experience. And I found, and even being kind of on the other end of the interviewing process now, that that doesn't matter as much as you might think when you're going through the interview process. What teams are looking for in a candidate is someone who's qualified to do the technical work, and also someone that's going to be a good fit for the team overall. And so I think kind of just highlighting those aspects and not necessarily worrying so much about previous internship experience is definitely a good way to go during the interview process.
That's a really good notion. I mean, it seems like if you can get an internship, go out and do it. But I've seen some students just bend over backwards and really just put themselves through the ringer trying to land an internship, or to have multiple internships at the same time. And I get it. If it's for the purpose of learning about a company's culture, I think that's great. But I think so many students are only doing it just to build a resume and not actually to evaluate, is this career path the career path I want to pursue or work down? What was your evaluation process for Wells Fargo? Like, with that being your first job, I guess you don't really have a grass is greener on the other type of perspective there. How did you go? What have you done to maybe like audit your experience working at the company and realize to yourself, okay, I want to keep doing this, or I want to work into this area within Wells Fargo? Like, what's your process for evaluating your fit and your interest level of continuing the work at the company?
For me, it's completely about my team and the other people that I'm working closely with. And even during the interview process, the type of person that when they open the floor up for questions, I will ask questions. Which I appreciate as an interviewer. If the person that I'm interviewing for a position asks a ton of questions about the team, about the company culture, about the dynamics within the team and the type of work that we do, it's a really great starting point so that you can actually get a better sense of how the team operates and what they do. Um, it's important because that interviewing stage is not just about the team determining if you're the right fit. You also need to determine if that team is the right fit for you. That is just as important, if not more important, as being kind of technically qualified for the role. There have been, plenty of people that I've worked with that have been fully capable of doing the role, but if the team dynamics are not the right fit, it's not going to be a long-term fit for you. And so I found that, working at Wells Fargo and working the team that I'm on is a good fit for me, which is why, I've been on my current team since 2015. So almost 10 years now, just on this current team. And it's because I really like my manager. I really like the fellow members of my team. And I really like the department and the other teams that we work closely with. Are just a really good fit. And we put a lot of effort together as a team into making sure that we're working as effectively as we can as a team together.
You bring up a really interesting point of, when you first joined the team, one of the things that really stood out to you, especially for new team members joining your team, is like the amount of questions they ask about the culture and how people interact and camaraderie and team norms and group norms and all that sort of stuff. I feel like, one, that's an incredibly valuable thing to do. And I think if you're a student, absolutely you should do it. In fact, let me take a moment to ask the students watching this a question real quick. What are some questions that you would like? What are 3 questions you would like to ask your employer when you get your first job or internship to better understand the culture? Post them in the comment section. I'd love to learn. But I guess on that notion, how can you avoid this feeling of sometimes, I don't know, sometimes companies are so tactical. There's in such a firefighting mode where they'd like hire you because they're just like, we need a warm body in a seat. Go, go, go. Put out this fire. Put out that fire. I don't have time to answer that question. I don't have time to answer this question. Do this, do that, make it all work or whatever. And it's like, I think so often companies preach this ethos of we care about the culture and we care about, team camaraderie and people ingratiating themselves and all that sort of stuff. But when it comes to push and shove, some companies are not as good at crafting that time. How do you go about achieving that with your team? And also, how can a student distinguish whether or not the pushback, if they get pushback from their company about asking about camaraderie and culture and all that stuff, how can they distinguish and discern, is this truly a phenomenal scenario where this is a rare circumstance and everyone's got to be all hands on deck, we got to go fire mode? Or is this just kind of like our perpetual existence and the company culture is just firefighting and we're not actually like building camaraderie? How can what are your suggestions on that? Does that question make sense?
That makes perfect sense. So I'll answer kind of the second part of the question first because it'll give a little bit of sense of what my team does. So I think kind of a key question to ask during an interview, or if you're kind of at that stage where you're discussing with the hiring manager or whoever's actually going to be managing you in the role, ask them flat out, what are the dynamics with your team? How often does your team meet together for a team offsite where you guys are just working on planning for the year or trying to figure out what are some of the projects that you want to accomplish over, the next year, maybe it's the next quarter, however often they might meet for an offsite. And if you get some hesitancy about that question, that's usually a flag that maybe they're not doing that, which I don't think is the best way to build good team dynamics. It's important to kind of bring everyone together as a team and set team goals. The team goals are just as important as your individual goals. And so in most companies, I've only worked for one, but I know other people who've worked for other companies. You have your own personal goals that you go through with your manager, and then your performance might be based on that particular, set of goals that you have for yourself as an individual. But there should also be goals for your team. And you will want to hear from that manager, how do you keep your team on task? How do you hold yourself accountable for the goals of your team? And what do you do to make sure that the team is running smoothly? And I think you'll get a good sense of how well that team operates and what that culture is among the team based on the response that you get. If there's some kind of hesitancy, or if the answer is something that you don't agree with, or kind of is a little bit off-putting to you, that's going to be a good sign for you that that might not be the right fit for you. For me personally, I don't like to be micromanaged. I know I've talked to Garrett about this before. And so if I were in an interview and a manager is describing micromanaging their team, I'm going to know right away that that's not going to be the right fit for me.
Yeah, of course. Well, I feel like most managers aren't going to acknowledge micromanaging, but I think other words that I've
Yeah,
heard.
they won't say micromanaging, but they will describe it.
Yeah, if you ever hear a manager say, and obviously, if you disagree with me, please let me know. But if words that I've heard that typically are indicators of a micromanager from a manager are things like, well, I'm a perfectionist. If you hear anyone ever say I'm a perfectionist, turn and run.
Yes.
Because nothing's ever going to be perfect. Nothing will ever be perfect, which means that if they demand perfection, they are always going to overlook your work, make sure it's done exactly the way that it's done, and there's never going to be any innovation or growth or grace. Now, granted, when it comes to, obviously you're in the financial space, you have to be precise. There's a difference between precise and perfection. Precise can mean that you dot the I's and you cross the T's, you make sure all the core things are done. Perfection is like an unattainable, I don't know, outcome that you're, working towards. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
That's absolutely right. I think that's a keyword to look out for. Another thing to look out for, if they describe being heavily involved in the process of everything that each of their team members is doing, that's a sign that you're dealing with a micromanager. A better way of managing, at least in my opinion, is being aware of what everyone's working on, but you have to have the trust that the people you've hired into these roles are going to be able to accomplish, what the task you've given them, and we'll reach out if they need assistance. If you're proactively going in there and checking in at every possible stage and involving yourself in that work, that's probably micromanaging a little bit more than allowing the members of your team to develop skills. Helping them develop skills is different than kind of doing the work for them, or at every stage showing people how everything is done.
Yeah, they're like, oh, I'm not a micromanager, but like every email that you may want to send to anybody internally or externally, you'll need to send it through
You
me
need to
first to
like,
approve it, and then I will forward it on to the necessary parties. And if it doesn't get out, then you'll try to figure it out for the next time. It's like, I'm not a micromanager. I just, I'll put my hand over your wrist while you're writing just to make sure you're writing the right characters. I'm being silly, but there are some crazy scenarios in work. But on the topic of perfection, I want to go to the other side of it. What can students do to avoid that fear of failure? Because I think a lot of students come into that first job, they're thinking to themselves like, okay, I am nervous. I want to make a good impression. I want to look good. What can students do to overcome that fear of failure and kind of be themselves and be comfortable asking some of these questions that we're discussing?
I think the first thing, it's really easy and it's easier said than done, but it's remembering that no one is perfect. The person you work for is not perfect. The other people on your team are not perfect. No matter how well regarded they are at their job, they've made a mistake. What people remember are how you handled your mistakes and what you did to correct them and how you learned from those mistakes. And so I found that the best way to kind of set up for success and avoiding that fear of making a mistake or that pressure of having to be perfect is to kind of set goals along the way for a project and having smaller, more manageable goals along the way to reduce that pressure of having an overall perfect final product. So that way you're able to kind of check in with yourself, double check to see if there are any mistakes. And if you're working with a team, more often than not, you're going to have people on your team that will appreciate being asked for help, and will love to kind of chime in and check work if you want to send it over to them to, hey, I just want to check in with you along the way on this project, or I've got a question. Do you know how to do this? I think, and I was guilty of this too, coming out of college, you are in a mindset of I need to do everything on my own, and then I get a grade on it. And it's all kind of dependent on what I did. It's not like that at all in the workforce. Usually there are other people working on things with you, and no one's angry when you ask for help if you've got a question, if you don't know how to do something. It's much better to ask, get the help, and then proceed to finish the project than to kind of struggle on your own, or to turn something in that is, I'll say, less than optimal, since we're not going to kind of use perfect, because there's never going to be anything that's perfect. And then it's, I think, also important to remember that this is your team, this is your manager. It's not the same as a professor. It's not the same as a teacher. They're your peers now. And so it's important to know that you're on that same level playing field with your team. And the more that you ask for feedback or ask for suggestions, they're going to do the same thing to you. A lot of the times when we're bringing someone on in their first role, we as a team are really excited about having someone who's going to have a fresh perspective on things, that's not burdened by the way that we've been doing things for the last 10 to 15 years. And it's really exciting to have someone that will just have brand new and fresh ideas that are unattached to just the way things have always been done, which I think in the business world is something we can really be kind of burdened by.
So, man, okay, Veronica, you brought up 3 really great points there that I want to touch on. First, I want to ask the students a question. You had the great idea of, if you've got a big, hairy, audacious goal, break it into smaller chunks. Students who are watching this, post in the comments section, what is a big, audacious goal that you've got in front of you? How can you break it down into some smaller, bite-sized chunks? Post in the comment section, write down what the big goal is, and then write down some smaller chunks in that. I thought that was such a great insight there. Second, I agree, but I potentially disagree with you on one other part. Like, I think curiosity and asking questions is really important, especially when you're getting started on the team. But what we want to avoid is the person who like needs to constantly have their hand held. You know what I mean? Like, there's nothing.
It's a fine line. That's a good
there's
point.
a fine line. Like,
Yeah.
you can ask this question one time, maybe twice. You cannot ask it any more times. Like, eventually it gets to the point where they're doing your job for you, and you've created a micromanaging situation because you're waiting to be told what to do. There's an element of like strategic thinking that you are going to need to do, and just like be able to do it yourself to like make it happen. Now, granted, first time you do it, definitely ask questions. I mean, I don't know. I lean towards the I'll make the mistake and ask for forgiveness before asking for permission side of things, but also I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a little more risk forward than the average person, but I still think it is helpful to ask for questions and for clarity. But if you do it every single time, you will become annoying, because then people are going to be like, okay, well, dude, I'm not going to do your job for you. Like, I answered this question 3 to 5 times last week for you. Like, don't ask it again. You know how to do this. Like, make it happen. Like, your benefit of being hired at this company is so then this work can be taken off of our plates and onto your plate. And if you keep asking us on how to do this work, and we've explained it to you a million times, you're not taking that work off of our plate. You're just adding more work to our plate.
That's a really good point. You don't want to use that as a crutch for every situation.
Balance.
It's really a balancing act, and I think you touched on it exactly. You don't want to be asking the same thing 2 or 3, 4 or 5 times. Ask the first time, maybe you need some clarity the second time, but by then it should be something that you've kind of picked up and are taking off of the plate for the rest of the team. I just think if you're really struggling with something and you're not sure what to do, instead of kind of spiraling and thinking about, how am I going to figure this out and trying to figure it out on your own, don't kind of become a victim to that. When you get to that stage, please ask someone for some assistance along the way, but you don't need to ask at every single step, every single one of those little goals. You don't need to check in on everything. It's just when it's something that you really need assistance with.
And mistakes happen. Like, I'll give an example. I remember back in the day when I was a server. I was a server at a restaurant that had kind of a toxic culture in terms of like training. I was new to the company, and part of our server's job is to do side work. And this was like a high-end brunch type of spot. And I remember at the end of one of our shifts, they were like, "Oh, Garrett, go fill up the syrup. Go fill up like the syrup containers." And I'm like, "Cool, awesome. Never done this job before. Where do I find the syrup?" They're like, "Don't be an idiot. Just like it's over there. Go find it." And I'm like, "Cool, got it, on it. I'll figure it out." Well, the only syrup I could find was the sugar-free syrup. And I'm like, "Are you sure you want me to put this sugar-free syrup in the containers?" They're like, "Dude, I don't have time to like help you figure this thing out. Just like go ahead and do it." So I did it. Well, lo and behold, I did it wrong. I couldn't find the actual big jug of real maple syrup. I was just filling these syrup containers up with sugar-free maple or syrup that I could find. It's the only thing I could find in the whole place. And I asked multiple times, like, "Hey, where can I find this thing?" And people were like, "Don't be an idiot. Find it in the kitchen." And I'm like, "All right." The only thing that seems obvious to me is this sugar-free syrup. So I filled up a bunch of jars of syrup. And I think eventually they had the realization of like, "Oh crap, you know what? Maybe we didn't do a good enough job of actually explaining the whole don't be an idiot thing and just figure it out. Maybe like we need to give some guidance or instructions on how to do this." But the point I guess I'm getting at is it wasn't the end of the world for me at that job. I made a mistake. I learned from it. I learned how to do it. But I also realized and learned that what might seem obvious to those people that are working at a company, if it's not obvious to you, it's okay to ask questions. And it's okay to be that person that like stands out and says like, "Hey, I'm sorry, I might be a little slow here. Can you walk me through this? Because I'm just not fully picking up this assignment." And then once they have explained it to you, then they're expecting you to retain it from then on out. So feel comfortable asking questions, I guess is what I'm trying to convey. And even in my example, I was at fault because I didn't push the button. I could have pushed the button even further where I'd asked multiple people and they just kept responding with "don't be an idiot." I could have been like, "Please walk me through where I can find and just fill the first syrup container. I'll fill the rest of them. Happy to do it. I just, the only syrup I can find is the sugar-free, and I don't think that's what's supposed to go in this containers." But I didn't. I learned from it. It worked out.
And I think that's a great example because on the other end, sometimes you think that the process and procedures are easy to follow and everything's clear. And for the new person coming in, it's not clear. And so sometimes being asked those questions points out where I was not clear in explaining what to do. The process document was not clear about what to do. And so we need to make those changes so that it is clear.
Well, it's a whole lot easier to think your instructions are a lot clearer.
Yes,
Why? Because you created the
you've done
instructions.
it before, right?
Yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense. So speaking of which, on this same topic, what can a student do to ask for feedback from their manager in an effective way? Like on that topic of asking questions, gaining clarity. I think that's another thing that a lot of companies overlook and people don't get into it, where you'll have a student, they're in their job, or rather a recent graduate, they're in their job, it's the first 6 to 8 months. They're like, a family member, a friend comes up to them and says, "How's the job going? And, does your boss like you? Are you doing good?" They're like, "Well, I'm still employed. Haven't gotten any feedback. I think that means I'm doing good, but I don't actually know." They just keep saying like, "These reports I'm doing are good." And that's just it. So how can you go about asking for feedback from your manager in an effective way, even in a fast-paced environment?
So I think one really good idea is to set up a dedicated one-to-one meeting with your boss. Some managers will automatically do this. Others are not as proactive with it. And it is completely appropriate for you to say, "Hey, I'd like for us to meet one-to-one every week, bi-weekly, every month, whatever frequency works for you." And then to be candid and be specific about the feedback that you want. Let your boss know, "Hey, I'd like some feedback on a particular project, maybe a particular skill, or maybe it's just your overall performance," but let them know exactly what you want feedback on. And then give them some time before you guys meet to actually do the feedback. It's going to be a lot easier if your boss has that time to come up with some thoughtful feedback instead of being put on the spot. And then, during the meeting when you're getting some feedback, if you need to ask further questions for clarity or for additional examples, don't be shy. Most managers will appreciate that opportunity to give feedback and to help their employees grow. And from personal experience, I will say this leads to you getting much better feedback during an annual review if you are having checkpoints throughout the year. You just sometimes need to let your boss know, hey, I want to meet with you on a one-to-one basis. Maybe once a month, once a quarter. I like for us to have a candid conversation about my performance so I can get some feedback on what I'm working on. Sometimes we just don't think about it. And then the whole year goes by and we have not had a conversation about performance at all outside of an annual review, which I don't think is the best way to kind of run your team. So I really just say it's like, again, it's not a professor-student type of relationship that you have with your manager. You can be candid with your manager about what you want from them. And as someone who manages people, I appreciate those types of conversations. Let me know what I can do to be a better manager for you.
I totally agree. I love that. And I know it may seem difficult, especially if the cultural norms in your company's culture are not to ask for feedback. If no one else has these regular one-on-ones, it's still okay to advocate for yourself. In fact, it's encouraged. Now, one thing I would just even add to that is when you have those feedback sessions, what's really important, what I think is really important, is to practice some strategic thinking. So think about not every company is great at explaining the why certain actions and behaviors are being done. And so what you can do is, especially if you're at a public company, you can see financial reports, you can see like where the vision of the company is going. If you're CEO or the person who's in charge of strategy, if they've laid out a vision for where the company is going, what you can do is say, hey, my understanding of me doing A, B, and C action is that this is going to help us achieve X, Y, and Z outcome. And also that this could help out with these things and ultimately help achieve our strategic vision of this. And you could, to your point of setting the agenda ahead of the time of the meeting, say, hey, here are my assumptions of how this work helps us out strategically. Can you clarify, is this in line with where we're actually going? Am I a little bit off? Am I making a little bit too big of a leap in terms of assumptions? Just like help paint the picture for me. I know it might seem like it's too much, but I can tell you in my experience working with leaders, when a team member comes up to them and is anticipating what their work means for other people on the team and the organization and for the company as a whole, it shows them that your leadership potential because you can actually see the greater picture of how they fit in the puzzle. Whereas most leaders assume that team members don't understand that because they haven't come to them with that clarity asking question.
That's right. And I think that's really important. The larger the company that you work for, the more disconnected your personal work might feel from the company's overall vision or the goals that they have. And so making sure that you're tying what you're doing some way back to those goals, not only will help kind of give you a sense of purpose in what you're doing, but it helps you have a little bit of a better mindset of how am I going to be measured about what am I doing to help the company's performance overall.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. I'd love to ask the students one last question. What are some questions that so if you're already in your job, what is a question that you would like to ask your boss that you've not asked your boss yet? If you are not in your job yet, what is a question that you would like to ask your inevitable like future boss once you land into that role that will help you better understand the role better? Post in the comment section. I'd love to learn more. Veronica, this has been an awesome workshop. This has been really insightful. I feel like we've covered a lot of ground on what students can do to prepare for that first job or internship. Is there any final imparting wisdom that you'd like to leave with the students before we log off?
I would say, especially if you're thinking about an internship, you're just going to be at that company for a short amount of time. Try to get the most out of it that you can. Networking, we haven't talked about it this entire time. I can't believe it, but networking is so important. Be willing to meet with people outside of the team that you might be working on. You can ask your other team members, hey, do you know people in other areas that I can just kind of chat with them just to get to know more about what the company does, what some of the other teams do. And you might think that it comes off as, hey, I'm not interested in our team and I want to know about these other teams. But having been on the other side of that scenario where interns or people early in their career have asked that from me, it doesn't come across that way at all. We're happy to connect people with other people. It helps to build a better, I think, company culture overall. And just kind of from a practical standpoint, we'd much rather keep good talent within the company, even if it's not going to be on our team. If there's some other type of work you'd like to do, we'd love to keep you in the organization instead of losing you to somewhere else.
So true. And to add to that, it's more shots on goal. Like if you're a person who's thinking to yourself, oh, I want to work up the organizational hierarchy. I want to become a manager. I want to become a VP. I want to become a maybe even C-suite level leader. Like if that's your aspirations, the more experience that you've got within that organization, the more likely you are to actually get to that level. So often I see, and in fact, actually, I've heard, a lot of horror stories of leaders who will get to like the highest level within a niche, but they're like, shoot, I've been in this niche my entire career for the last 17 years. I don't
know what anything else was.
Exactly. Not only do I not know what anything else is, but I don't know what the next step is for me because I've hit the peak of whatever this like organizational unit is within my organization. Now, you may want that, and if that's the case, that's all fine and dandy. But especially earlier on in your career, that's the moment, that's the time to explore. So go out and network, meet other people, find other opportunities. Because if you just stay within your isolated siloed team, what you're really hoping for is that your boss is on a rocket ship. Because whoever, I guess, to put it in another way, every organization has a handful of people that are just on a rocket ship. And they just light up and work straight up a corporate ladder. And typically they bring up their direct reports with them if they've got a really good relationship. You can ride someone else's coattails, or you can be the person that's on the rocket ship. Ideally, you are the person on the rocket ship. But sometimes that's hard. Sometimes it's political. Sometimes there are sponsors that are involved. There are other factors that go into who gets on the rocket ship and who's not on the rocket ship. But the more diverse experiences you have in and or around an organization, the more bosses you can have. If you build a strong relationship with more bosses, hopefully, ideally, one of them's on the rocket ship and they're like, hey, I had an amazing working relationship with you. I'm about to go from manager level to SVP, senior vice president level. I want to take you with me. You say, heck yeah, I'm all the way in. And now you can ride those coattails. But if you only stick in one silo, you potentially hinder your ability to get to that next level because those other managers that could be on the rocket ship may not even know who you are.
That's right.
So, Veronica, this has been a great workshop. I appreciate you spending your time with us this evening. And students, thanks for spending your time with us this evening as well. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and I look forward to seeing y'all next semester. See you, everybody.